Mr. Scindia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Joshiji, for having me. It's always a pleasure to be back at PTI.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. We'll start off with the latest topic that's trending. It's the US elections. Mr. Trump has obviously won the elections. What will it mean for Indo-US relations in your opinion?
Well, let me say this, that what we're talking about is the world's largest democracy and the world's oldest democracy. There have been huge parts of intersection between Indo-US relations, and those relationships have taken on a much more concrete form in the last decade, since Prime Minister Narendra Modi has forged an independent relationship with the US. It has resulted in not only a huge amount of trade and economic thrusts coming to the fore, but has also led to a strategic relationship on many global issues, from the environment to technology, to space, to defense areas, and the latest being that we are going to be setting up a fab in India to even supply supply chips to US defense manufacturing companies. Now, that's a first. And I think that the US-India relationship under the stewardship of both Prime Minister Modi and President-elect Donald Trump will be on a very, very firm footing going forward.
So, one of the biggest supporters of Mr. Trump has been Elon Musk, and Elon Musk obviously is very interested in doing business in India. So, I'll ask you a question about him. What is the status of his application for the spectrum?
Well, I think everyone's interested in doing business in India. Yeah. I would like you to name me a single person who's not interested in doing business in India, because India is the place to be. India, Bharat has transformed herself in the last 10 years. Bharat today is on the world stage in terms of attracting investment, being a huge economy and an opportunity for firms to invest and grow. And I think that new areas will continue to emerge. And I would not want you to limit it only to telecom and to the satellite area, but across the board. When I was Civil Aviation Minister, the amount of interest that was garnered into looking at opportunities in India, both on the engineering side with regard to engine makers like Safran, or airplane manufacturers like Boeing and Airbus, and the fact that Airbus put in a final assembly line in Vadodara, the first time in India's history that's happened for the C-295 aircraft, which Prime Minister himself has inaugurated just last month, shows you that there's a tremendous amount of interest in India. As far as the particular question that you have raised, we are very clear that we would want firms to participate in India. The regulatory process is very clear and transparent. The new Telecom Act has been passed. Satellite spectrum is very clearly a part of that in Schedule 1. And therefore, we are open to look at application of any entity that wants to invest in India. At this point of time, I think only 1 or 2 licenses have been given out. And whoever else wants to participate, India's surely going to welcome that.
The Telecom Act allows administrative allocation of the spectrum, which is what Elon Musk would like, but it has put him at loggerheads with the domestic companies, which would rather have the spectrum auctioned. How do you reconcile this?
I'm not Minister of Satellites, and I'm not Minister of either. So let me put it in telecom parlance, I'm not Minister of Terrestrial Networks or non-terrestrial networks. I'm the Minister of Communications. And for me, what's very important is to ensure that every customer gets a bouquet of services that are available to him through all technologies that are prevalent in the world. You've seen a transition like this also happen, or an inflection point, if I may call it that, rather than a transition. When the world moved from 2G, 3G to 4G, because you then had to lay new equipment and new lines. In terms of technology, it's an ever-moving space, and there's never a period of stasis, and therefore you always have to be on top of the curve. In terms of the policy, it's fairly clearly defined. We follow for space and for satellite spectrum, we follow the ITU. Every country has to follow the ITU. The International Telecommunications Union is the organization that lays out the policy for spectrum in space or satellites. And the ITU has been very clear in terms of this spectrum being given out on an assignment basis. In addition, if you look across the world, today I cannot think of a single country that auctions spectrum for satellite. It's all assigned administratively across the world. The third, on a technological basis, and I do not profess to be an engineer, however, please do understand that when you're talking about spectrum at that level, which is above 7, 8 gigahertz, at that point of time, that spectrum is only spectrum that can be shared. And so therefore, if there's a spectrum that is shared between Amar and Joshiji, how can you then auction it? Satellite spectrum has been given out for GSO networks today, which is also being shared. You have public broadcasting being done through that, you have defense purposes, you have some satellites which are GSO satellites which are today using it, and it's a shared spectrum. And therefore, satellite spectrum cannot be auctioned. It has to be assigned administratively. Now, what that cost is going to be and what the charge is going to be is a fairly transparent process which will be decided by the TRAI.
Sure. Are there any concerns that the spectrum is possibly be given to a foreign entity rather than a domestic entity?
No.
Security-wise.
At the end of the day, you have to look at it from a service provider basis, right? And from a service provider basis, I think it's important that it is system agnostic. However, law enforcement agencies' rules must be complied with.
Sir, it has been 4 months that you have been in charge of this ministry. When you came in, you spoke about making Bharat a superpower in telecom sector. What are the challenges that you have encountered in these 4 months, and what are the targets, immediate targets that you think you're set for yourself for the sector?
So that's a very good question, Amar. But I think it requires some time to go through it. But if I may give you a little bit of a snapshot, or if I may an elevator pitch in terms of where we are, I think India is now has transitioned in the last decade. We were a follower of the world in 4G. We marched with the world in 5G. I do think that we have the ability to lead the world in 6G. And why I say that is the following, that within the ITU, International Telecommunications Union, and we had a conference of the WTSA, the World Telecommunications Standards Assembly in Delhi. So, for example, it's the first time that it was held outside. First time it was held in Asia, and that decision was taken to hold it in India. We had over 3,500 delegates coming here from 160 countries. We had 36 representations at ministerial levels. The largest WTSA conference in the history of the International Telecommunications Union. So that speaks to you of the appetite, of the promise, of the capability of India within this space. Now, if you look at the roadmap and the path that India has taken over the last decade, you've grown from roughly about 40 million telecom subscribers to close to 1.16 billion telecom subscribers. On the issue of internet, you've grown from 254 million to close to about 960 million subscribers. On the issue of broadband, which is greater than 2 Gbps, you have grown from 60 million to almost 924 million. So that's the kind of exponential growth that India has experienced. So that's on the supply side. On the cost side, as far as voice is concerned, you've seen voice that was at roughly 51 paise a minute in 10 years ago, today at 3 paise a minute, so virtually free. If you look at data, 1 GB of data, you have seen that price going from 287 rupees to 8.8 rupees. Both voice and data have gone through close to between a 97% to a 93% decline in prices. So you've seen a huge shift in the universe and the landscape, and both the breadth and the depth of penetration of telecom across our country. Now, what does this mean going ahead? We've seen the fastest 5G rollout in the world happen in India. Right, 21 months, you've covered close to 99% of districts of India, close to about 82% of the population. You've laid out close to 4.5 lakh BTSs across the system. In the last decade, you've seen OFC fiber being laid out in this country from 11 lakh kilometers to almost 41 lakh kilometers. That's the exponential growth that we're talking about. So I really do believe that going forward, we have the ability to lead in 6G. That confidence also comes to me from the fact that for the first time in the history of our country, we've produced our own 4G stack. We're the only sixth country in the world to be able to do that. So what are we up against? We're now head to head with the Ericssons and the Siemens and the Nokias and the like. The core has been built out by CDOT, which is a government-owned entity. The RANs are being built out by the radio access networks are being built out both by CDOT and by Tejas Networks. And the SI, the system integrator, is TCS. So end-to-end, first mile to last mile, is an integrated Atmanirbhar Bharat solution, which has only been possible because of the Prime Minister's leadership and his resolve to make sure that gets done. We are today rolling out, coming to the roadmap, we are today rolling out close to about 1 lakh BTSs in the country on 4G with BSNL. We've completed, at last count, close to about 50,000. It is my resolve to make sure that by April, May next year, we've rolled out 100,000 BTSs, which means you'll have your own domestic 100% public-owned company rolling out 4G. The move from 4G to 5G then is only tweaking the core a little bit, as well as adding an additional BTS. So by the time, I hope, by the time that we complete rolling out 4G, the evolution of transforming that 4G system to 5G will also begin. So by April, May next year, hopefully some sites will become 5G enabled as well within the BSNL system. So that's the alacrity with which we're working. Along with that, so that's my first priority. My second is to ensure 4G saturation across the country. We have close to about 37,000 villages that are left with connectivity on 4G in the country. A lot of them in very distant areas, far-flung areas. We are looking at making sure that we have 100% saturation on 4G, again by March, April next year. As per date, the count of those 27,000 roughly BTSs that we need to roll out, we've done about 10,000. So we've got only another 17,000 to roll out. We're looking at roughly 160 lakh population that will be covered through those 27,000 villages, of which we have already covered 70 lakh today. So that's my second priority. The third priority is to ensure that along with the many gifts that technology brings, it also brings some curses. And those are all the complaints that we as customers face, and even I as a customer face every single day, in terms of the number of marketing calls you get on your phone, the number of fraud calls that come in. And we put in place a full system to be able to tackle that. Our DOT fraud detection network has saved close to about 2,500 crores of people's assets today as we speak. Through Sanchar Sathi and Chakshu, we've put in place a system that has blocked disconnected close to about 2.9 lakh phones. We've blocked close to about 1.8 million headers in terms of messages that go out. And along with that was another vicarious method through which people would, when you have technology, you always have a way of beating it. And they would use servers outside India, which would masquerade themselves as a +91 number. And we've put into place a software that stops these spoofed calls. And we inaugurated that on the 24th of October. So we are roughly about 10 days into it. And we've been blocking close to about 1.35 crore calls per day on that software. So where all systems go. In terms of fraud as well, we've put together a new software where we are integrating law enforcement agencies as well as banks. 520 agencies have been onboarded, of which 420 are roughly banks. So that's my third pillar that I'm looking at. And then we have a bunch of other things which I'm also following, but these 3 or 4, and then the Telecom Act, the promulgation of all the rules of the Telecom Act, which was passed in Parliament last November. The first thing I did when I assumed office was I issued the notification of the Telecom Act. And why is that important? That's important because the minute you do that, then your 180-day counter starts. And within 6 months, mandatorily, you have to issue all the rules. And therefore, there's no pushing of files anymore to a later date. So by the end of December, there are a total of close to 31 rules that need to be out. We've done almost about 14 or 15. And the balance we hope to have done by the end of December. So there are many things on the menu, and we've just talked about telecom, but there are many things on the menu that we're looking at.
You spoke about this international incoming spoof calls. Then you started working on it since October 24th. Do you have a deadline for when that will be completely eliminated?
Well, let me say this, that I dare say that cannot be completely eliminated, but you didn't have a software. So the software is in place. And we've blocked 1.35 crore calls daily. So if you look at the network, if you're looking at a 10-day period, you've already blocked 13.5 crore calls. So beyond a point, it's not going to be remunerative enough for anyone to try that via media, which is being consistently blocked as a firewall on the gateway.
So is there a need for revising the KYC norms? Because I think what is happening is people are getting those fake SIM cards made very easily in certain part of the country. You would know this better. So is there a need to revamp the KYC so that such kind of spam calls cannot be made?
The spam calls are not coming through the KYC, through making loopholes to the KYC norms, because those are very stringent. The spam calls are coming that Amar is sitting outside India using a server in X country or Y country and routing the calls through to India. So it's an international issue, and that's why you need a software to make sure that your gateways and your firewalls are very, very compact and clear.
Can we just come back to the question about spectrum, the auction of the spectrum? When can we see the next auction?
So auctions of spectrum are done with no fixed timelines, but they generally happen on an annual basis. It's really a basis the requirement of the industry. So you have a storehouse of an important raw material which must be given out to be able to transmit telephony calls. The last time we had done it this year itself, so possibly next year.
Is there a need for change of rules for utilization of an allocation of spectrum? Do you think is there a need to change those rules?
I don't think so. Why? If it ain't broke, why fix it?
I've got a question about BSNL. You described it as a gamble that paid off. What is the vision you have for BSNL in future? Where do you see it growing?
So first of all, I think it's important to understand that BSNL has a professional group of people managing it. The last thing you want is for ministers to be interfering with PSUs. It's for PSUs to run. What we need to do is to ensure that we need to comply with our fiduciary responsibility, which is to look at the big picture, make sure that the vision is clearly in place, the targets are clearly in place, assist these companies if and when required, and possibly monitor performance. I think that's my role as a minister. And very clearly, I see a huge opportunity in BSNL. We have added upwards of 65 lakh subscribers over the last 3 to 4 months. Every single month, we've seen new subscribers and porting happening from other subscribers. So that's on the asset side. What's important on the challenges side is to make sure that you have customer retention. And to be able to have customer retention, you need to do two things. You need to provide a suite of services that every customer is looking for, and make sure that your customer orientation and your customer service is such that that customer is continually satisfied by your company. And we put some very big picture targets that we have in mind in place. As I mentioned to you, we've rolled out close to about 50,000 sites. We'll roll out about 1 lakh sites by next year. We would like BSNL to look at making sure its customer interface goes much more digital. We would like it to look at being value additive in terms of increasing its customer base. And there are some targets that I have in mind which I have given to BSNL, but it's not something I want to necessarily share with you. But I would like BSNL to be one of the major players in the telecom sector. We today have close to about 7.5 to 8% market share. We've got close to 9.6 crore subscribers. I'd like that to increase exponentially because we are starting off from a low base. As we have infused capital, we have supplied spectrum. We've allowed the company to grow. We would like to see exponential addition to that customer base, and it becomes one of the formidable players in the telecom landscape in India. It's very important for customers to have choice, very akin to the civil aviation space, where it was my prerogative to ensure that we have 3 or 4 players in the game. Similarly, in the telecom space, we must continue to have 3 or 4 players in the game.